Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC San Antonio, Marlon Vera versus Cory Sandhagen just ended, and this is going to be my UFC San Antonio post-fight. I'm mainly going to discuss the main event, Vera versus Sandhagen, but I'm also going to touch on some of the other notable fights on the card. Starting off with the main event, you have Cory Sandhagen winning a split decision over Marlon Vera. Now, the fact that this is a split decision is a slap in the face. This is an embarrassing moment for MMA. I don't know how any judges scored the fight for Marlon Vera, but we'll get to that in a second. How did the fight actually go? Going into this fight, I thought Cory Sandhagen was just a little bit more technical in the feet, and I thought he had a little bit more weapons, a little bit more diversity, a little bit more urgency, and I also thought he could mix in the grappling, similar to what he did in the Song Yadong fight. Didn't have a whole lot of success in the Song Yadong fight with the grappling. I think he only got one takedown, but he mixed it in and just made it a threat, and I knew Marlon Chito Vera had some issues with his takedown defense. And that's basically what happened in this fight. In the first round, Cory was winning in the striking. He was pumping the jab, landed a couple leg kicks. It wasn't like, he wasn't blowing Marlon Vera out of the water. But then eventually he went for a takedown, got him up against the fence, tripped him to the ground, and Marlon Vera had nothing for him on the ground. He was just controlling Marlon Vera, landing elbows, landing ground and pound shots. He was being active. It wasn't like fight finishing damage, but he clearly won the first round 10-9. Second round, similar to the first round, Cory was winning on the feet, gets a takedown, gets some control, and lands some damage on the ground. Eventually, there's kind of like a little bit of a scramble, and Cory starts to look for a submission attempt. I think it was a Kimura he was looking for as Chito was starting to scramble, and because he looked for that submission attempt, Chito was able to get up, and then basically that's like with a minute and a half, I think, left in the round. Cory Sandhagen continues just to march forward, pump the jab, land some good shots. Clear second round for Cory Sandhagen. Third round, I believe the third round was the closest fight because Chito just didn't seem to really do much in the first and second. Chito seemed to be a little bit more aggressive in the third round. Chito landed a good 1-2 in the third round, but you had Sandhagen who was pumping the jab. He was landing that right uppercut. He was landing some good body kicks. He was landing some good leg kicks and calf kicks. And the output was like 3-1, I think, for Cory Sandhagen, or at least that's what it seemed like throughout the fight. Round 3 was kind of close, but I thought it was pretty clear Cory Sandhagen as well. But that was the closest round of the fight. And I can't remember for sure in round 3. I don't think Sandhagen even shot it on a takedown. If he did, it was like a half-hearted attempt. And just won round 3 based off the striking. And Marlon Vera just seemed demoralized, wasn't throwing much. The output just wasn't there. Then we have round 4. Cory comes out in round 4. I guess his coaches are telling him, it was a little bit closer there in round 3. Let's get some takedowns, cement the position. And he starts looking for some takedowns in round 4, and he's not getting them. And you start to wonder, is the momentum going to start to swing? But no, Cory just outstrikes him, landing that uppercut, landing leg kicks, landing good body kicks, moving well. Marlon Vera is throwing far less strikes, and Cory Sandhagen just outstrikes him in the fourth round, shoots in on a couple takedowns, doesn't get it ultimately, but wins. There's even a couple times he's feinting like flying knees that get close. There was one that landed throughout the fight. Cory Sandhagen wins round 4. Round 5. In round 5, Cory was a little bit more assertive looking for his takedowns. Like in round 4, he shot in on a couple, but it almost seemed like he was just trying to get Vera thinking about him. Round 5, he started really actually shooting in on him and having good shots. Eventually gets a takedown. He got stuffed a couple times, but eventually gets a takedown, is controlling Marlon Vera for a little bit, beating him up, and it's looking like, okay, it's going to end the fight like this. Then Cory Sandhagen kind of has him stacked against the fence. Marlon Vera is throwing illegal up kicks, and a couple of them come in contact with Cory Sandhagen. This has already happened previously. It was happening a little bit earlier in the round as well, but the portion I'm talking about, it was like 30 seconds later, he starts throwing some more up kicks, and Cory Sandhagen at this point looks over at Big Dan Miragliotta, who's the referee, and while he's looking over at Big Dan Miragliotta, what are you going to do here? I'm getting up kicked when both my knees are on the mat, and Chito Vera pops back to his feet, and then that's probably, with 2 minutes left in the round, minute and a half left in the round, Cory Sandhagen outstrikes him for the rest of the round, but it's kind of close. And then the last 10 seconds of the fight, and this really actually enrages me, Marlon Vera, all of a sudden just starts walking forward, throwing bombs, looking to take Cory Sandhagen's head off. And Cory Sandhagen, I think, landed a nasty left hand in the fight. And I'm just wondering, where was that at, Marlon Vera? You had 20 24 minutes and 50 seconds before that. And there was no output from you. And now all of a sudden you got this crazy output that you're looking to, take Cory Sandhagen's head off. It was just disturbing the last 10 seconds. Round 5 was clearly Cory Sandhagen as well. So I scored this fight 50-45 for Cory Sandhagen. I think it was a pretty clear decision win. I think you could maybe make the, call and give Chito Vera the round 3 just because he landed a couple hard shots in round 3. But even that I think is a bit of a stretch. When we get to the judges' scorecards, you have 3 judges. You have Chris Lee, Saul D'Amato, who are known for being horrible. And then the last judge, I can't pronounce his last name, but his name is Joel. He gives the last 3 rounds to Marlon Vera. He gives the first 2 rounds to Cory Sandhagen, and he gives the last 3 rounds to Marlon Vera, giving Marlon Vera a decision win at 48-47 in his book. Luckily, Saul D'Amato scored at 50-45, and Chris Lee scored at 49-46, giving round 3 to Marlon Vera. I think both of those are sensible scorecards. I think both of those scorecards you can easily defend and say, look, here's how I scored it. The judge, whose name is Joel, is apparently very inexperienced in judging. He needs to be fired from the sport, or he needs to be sent down to judge amateurs, or he needs to be, I don't know, someone needs to Boston Crab some sense into him. I don't know what needs to happen. He has no business judging a main event in the UFC of 2 top-ranked guys. The fact that he gave that split decision, or almost, caused the decision for Marlon Vera in a fight that he clearly lost, the fact that he judged it 48-47, he has no idea what he's looking at. And I don't know if he's not paying attention, if he's sitting on his phone during the fight, or if he's biased towards a certain fighter, or what is going on. But 48-47 for Marlon Vera is indefensible. It is unbelievable. When you have Chris Lee, who's notoriously known for having bad scorecards, as well as Saul D'Amato, who's known notoriously for giving bad scorecards, and they are the voices of reason, we have a big issue here. And we're going to talk about judging on this fight card as a whole because it was absolutely disturbing. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think that's crazy to even attempt to give this fight to Marlon Vera is an absolute joke. So what really, in a broad scope, what went on in this fight? Marlon Vera just couldn't get off. There was no volume. All the weaknesses we've seen from Marlon Vera over the course of fights that he has won, lack of output, not having good defensive grappling, were really shined through in this fight, and Cory Sandhagen took advantage of it. We've seen in the Rob Font fight. You saw Marlon Vera drop him multiple times and win the fight, but 23 minutes of that fight, Rob Font was outstriking Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera had these big moments that made up for it. You go back to the Frankie Edgar fight. Frankie Edgar was out grappling him. Frankie Edgar's now retired. That wasn't that long ago. Frankie Edgar was taking him down. Cory Sandhagen's younger, faster, more athletic. I knew Marlon Vera, I've talked about it. I love Marlon Vera. You match him up with Aljamain Sterling, he's getting mauled. You match him up with Merab, he's getting mauled. Cory Sandhagen is a well-rounded fighter. I know most people think of him as a striker. We saw him mix it in the Song Yudong fight. We saw him mix in the grappling. I said in my prediction, which I actually predicted Cory Sandhagen 49-46 decision win. But I said in that video, I said, if somebody has the grappling advantage here, it's Cory Sandhagen. And I think he will mix in some shots just to have Marlon Vera thinking about him. But Marlon Vera, just all his deficiencies shine through in this fight. He wasn't throwing any output. He was the less technical fighter. Cory Sandhagen was just piecing him up on the feet. It wasn't bad by any means, but Cory Sandhagen was switching stances, chopping the leg, switching stances, slamming kicks to the body, switching stances, throwing head kicks, pumping the jab. Then he would step in, pump the jab, land the right uppercut. Cory Sandhagen was the more technical striker, and then on top of that, he was mixing in the grappling, which was a recipe for disaster for Marlon Vera because he's already a slow starter. He already relies a little bit too much on his durability, his toughness, and his power. And Cory Sandhagen is hard to hit. Don't get me wrong, he landed a couple good shots on Cory Sandhagen in this fight. Not very many. There was really only 2 good power shots by Marlon Vera landed in this fight. But Cory Sandhagen's hard to hit. He has good footwork. He has a good variety of attack. He has a lot of experience, and also he's very well-rounded. And for Marlon Vera, it's hard to deal with all that coming at you at once. He's worried about the takedown. He already has a low output in a normal fight where he's not worried about the takedown. But now he's worried about the takedown. And I think in this fight, he kind of froze. He wasn't willing to throw combinations because he was worried about the threat of the takedown. And then by the time, in the 3rd and 4th round, where he worked up some confidence to defend the takedown, he still just wasn't going. He wasn't, I mean, his corner was telling him, we need more output. We need more output. We need to beat his ass in the 4th and 5th round. I think that's what his coach said in between rounds. We need to win these rounds. And Marlon Vera was just stuck in neutral. And Cory Sandhagen is just using his footwork. And he wasn't even moving a whole lot. This wasn't a Cory Sandhagen that was like Dominic Cruz in his prime, where he's just circling all around the cage and running from Marlon Vera or anything like that. He was kind of, he was moving well, but he was standing right in front of him and throwing combinations. And he was rushing forward and throwing that uppercut and landing that uppercut over and over and over again. And he was landing good teeps to the body and good leg kicks. And Cory Sandhagen was managing range very well. And all that mixed together with the fact that Marlon Vera now has to worry about the threat of the takedown. And then once Marlon Vera was on the ground, we know Marlon Vera for his stamina. Once he got taken down, there was no sense of urgency to get back up. There was really no sense of urgency. In the first round, he just closed his guard and just sat there and got pounded out with elbows for like 3 minutes of the entire first round. And there was no sense of urgency. So there was no sense of urgency in this fight in general, even when the fight was standing. The grappling deficiencies are still there. They've been there. That's been a glaring hole we've known for a while. And just Cory was a little bit more technical. He was chopping the legs. He was landing the better shots on the feet. And Cory does have a threat of knockout power as well. So all those skills were just too much for Marlon Vera. I do think a little bit there was too many people relying on the toughness and durability and power of Marlon Vera. And it's just not always going to happen. You're not always just going to get outstruck and then find a big shot and win the rounds that way or win a fight that way via finish. He was getting outstruck by Dominic Cruz, and he found the finish. You can make an argument it was like 2-2 in that 4th round. He found the finish. You can't rely on that when you're in the bantamweight division, which is one of the best divisions in the UFC. And in this fight, Marlon Vera, all the glaring holes that we knew were there, but kind of got overlooked because of the fact that he continued to be able to find ways to win, were exposed tonight against Cory Sandhagen. We already knew they were there, but Marlon Vera would find a way to mask those holes. Frankie Edgar would be taking him down and controlling him and arguably winning the fight, and then he lands a front kick KO in the 3rd round. Everyone forgets about what happened before that. They just remember the front kick KO. They forget about what happened in the Rob Font fight because inevitably he beat Rob Font and was dropping him like every round. So it masked a lot of those weaknesses. Now they are glaring. We know them. Cory Sandhagen exposed them badly. And Cory Sandhagen is a very tough challenge for any fighter in the division. And this was a quality win over a very durable Marlon Vera. I didn't think he would get him out of there. That's why I picked him via decision. Marlon Vera, it's going to be very tough to finish a guy like Marlon Vera. But also, Marlon Vera wasn't throwing a whole lot of leg kicks this fight. He threw a couple hard leg kicks, landed maybe 2 really solid calf kicks on Cory Sandhagen. But they really weren't there, and I thought that was going to be a key to success if Marlon Vera was able to get it done. He had to limit the mobility of Cory Sandhagen, but just wasn't able to get it done, even though one judge wanted to give him the decision, which is one of the most egregious things I've ever seen. So Marlon Vera is going to drop back in the rankings. Maybe Sean O'Malley's going to want that rematch now. That's a fight they could make. You have Cory Sandhagen calling out Merab after the fact. Merab Dvalishvili just defeated Petr Yan. Cory Sandhagen hasn't lost to Aljamain Sterling. And he's been fiending for that fight back. And he's been saying, I'm ready for that fight. And Merab is a very similar style to Alja. Obviously, it's a little bit different because the pressure that Merab puts on. But Cory Sandhagen calls him out. I think that's a phenomenal call out. I think that's a phenomenal matchup. Maybe bailing Sean O'Malley out a little bit because now Sean O'Malley gets to sit on the sideline and not really fight anyone unless maybe he takes that Cheeto Vera rematch now because Vera, looks like he's very beatable, especially against Cory Sandhagen. Maybe he takes that fight. But Merab versus Cory Sandhagen will be very interesting. Cory Sandhagen's striking looked excellent tonight. His grappling looks like it's leveled up a bit. And I just think he's a guy that's going to be perpetually a top 5 contender in the bantamweight division, which is the nastiest division in all the UFC. I believe 135 is the best division in the UFC. So Cory Sandhagen versus Merab can be like a fight night main event. It'll be a very interesting fight. Can Cory Sandhagen deal with that pressure? Cory Sandhagen has great knees. He has great uppercuts. Can he use those to defend the takedowns of Merab Dvalishvili and win a fight against that crazy level of pressure? It'll be super interesting. Couple more notes on the card other than Cory Sandhagen getting that decision, and somehow it's a split decision, which that judge needs to be fired immediately. Holly Holm versus Yana Santos, formerly Yana Kutsukaya. I keep wanting to call her that. Holly Holm just out-grappled her for the entire fight. Wasn't a super eventful fight. Holly Holm clearly won. She had opportunities to finish her, and for some reason, instead of actually trying to finish her, she just shoulder striked her while she was in side control. I don't get it. I'm not impressed. People are going to act like, oh, that's Holly Holm 2.0. She's in her 40s, okay? She's in her 40s, and I know the bantamweight division isn't that good, but I was not impressed with Holly Holm tonight, especially considering Yana Santos was out forever. Moving down the card, Nate Landwehr versus Austin Lingo. Nate Landwehr gets a rear naked choke in the second round. Austin Lingo looked good early, but Nate Landwehr just wears that damage, just absorbs that damage, just charges up and starts landing good shots of his own. Lingo looked good for taking this on short notice, and he landed some good shots. He busted up Nate Landwehr. But Nate Landwehr just comes on so strong, eventually finishes Austin Lingo in the second round. This fight's meaningless, so there's really not too much to discuss. Neither one of these guys are really ever going to be contenders. But a fight I want to talk about that I never thought I would actually want to talk about, Maycee Barber versus Andrea Lee. Andrea Lee was brutally robbed in this fight. I had it 30-27 for Andrea Lee. Maybe you could give the first round to Maycee Barber. I thought Andrea Lee was winning the striking exchanges. She was clearly winning the grappling exchanges, and she was doing some damage when she took her down and controlled her. I thought Andrea Lee clearly won the second and third round. I gave her the first round. I think that one's kind of debatable, but I really think it was Andrea Lee's round as well. She was landing better shots on the feet. This was a low-level fight because a lot of, both of these girls were really just kicking air and, screaming at the top of their lungs while they were kicking air. Andrea Lee should have won this fight. And while I'm happy that I get to bask in Tony Kelly being pissed that Andrea Lee, his girlfriend, fiance, wife, lost, the fact that Maycee Barber gets another robbery split decision win is egregious. The judges are horrible. Why are we even going to Texas anymore? This commission is terrible. Andrea Lee won this fight. She should have won this fight. Big Dan Murgliato, who was the referee in the main event, for some reason was the judge in this fight, one of the judges in this fight. He gave it 30-27 for Maycee Barber. I don't know how you come up with that scorecard. And maybe someone will disagree with me. Maybe you'll give it to Maycee Barber just because she's charging forward, punching air at some points in time, and then getting taken down and controlled and beat up on the ground a little bit. I don't know. There's no way you can defend a 30-27 scorecard for Maycee Barber. Maybe you could say, okay, first or second, I would kind of understand, but I would still think you were doing some type of drug while you were watching the fight. This was a brutal robbery. Andrea Lee should have won this fight. Horrible decision. And there were some questionable decisions on this card. Albert Duraev, Chidi Njokuani. I don't think this was a robbery by any means. I thought Njokuani won the second and third round. He got dominated in the grappling in the first round, but I thought he landed the better shots in the second and third round and should have won the fight. Ultimately, this card was not great. I also thought the Victor Altamirano versus Vinicius Salvador fight, I thought Salvador should have got the decision. I think I had him winning round 2 and 3. This wasn't a robbery either, but I think the judges got that wrong there too. It was a decent fight, but this card was just lackluster. The CJ Vergara, Daniel De Silva fight was absolutely insanity. Daniel De Silva 10-8 CJ Vergara in the first round. Has him running for his life. Honestly, it was embarrassing for CJ Vergara. He was turning his back and sprinting away. I don't even know how. If I was a ref, I'd take a point. I'd take a point for avoiding the fight, for stalling. He was sprinting. And I know he was hurt. I'd never seen a man in the UFC turn his back and sprint for 45 seconds to avoid a fight. That was crazy, but ultimately CJ Vergara wins in the second round, gets a ground and pound TKO in the second round. Daniel De Silva gassed himself out looking for the finish in the first round. So CJ Vergara gets a crazy comeback. But other than that, this card really wasn't great. There wasn't really any great prospects on the card, even like decent wins like Lucas Alexander over Steven Peterson. Peterson retired after the fact, and it's not really a fight that I'm looking at. Oh, this guy might be a contender or whatnot. And also you had 50-year-old Daniel Pineda beating Tucker Lutz, which actually was a decent performance. Honestly, he was landing good on the feet. Eventually gets a guillotine in the second round because Tucker Lutz was winning the early exchanges in the first round, and then in the second round, Daniel Pineda started to take over a little bit. Tucker Lutz started to look for a takedown, gave up a guillotine opportunity twice, escaped one, and then eventually got caught in the second attempt. And now I just went out of order on basically the entire card. But UFC San Antonio was massively underwhelming. Even the main event, even though I enjoyed the main event, it just wasn't super competitive. So I'm a little bit disappointed in this card. On paper, this card was trash outside of the main event anyway. And sometimes they can exceed expectations. This did not exceed my expectations by any means. The judging was horrible. I want the UFC never to go back to Texas ever again. I know they pull some of the judges from some of the other commissions and whatnot, but something's going on in Texas with this commission because these scorecards were all over the place and they were horrific tonight. And if Marlon Vera would have somehow gotten the decision in the main event, it would have been one of the most egregious robberies that I've ever seen in my entire life. And luckily that didn't happen. The crisis was averted, but the fact that it was even a possibility was just craziness. So Cory Sandhagen gets a solid win over Marlon Vera, who I believe was ranked number 3. And now it looks like we're going to see Cory Sandhagen versus Merab Dvalishvili. And maybe we get Marlon Chito Vera versus Sugar Sean O'Malley too. I would love that matchup. But let me know what you guys think about the UFC San Antonio card. I'm genuinely curious of your opinion. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And thank you so much for watching.